Every year, millions of American students are subjected to violence and bullying in the school setting. My purpose today is to persuade you to support mandatory school uniforms for students in public schools. I have a 6-year-old son. He's only in 1st grade, and already we've had to deal with a class bully who pushes him around and calls him names. School violence isn't just about gangs or mass shootings. It's about little incidents like these that have the capacity to damage a child's identity and make school a hostile place. As parents, we want the best for our children. We want them to be safe and happy when they go to school every day. We want them to be able to focus and truly engage in their studies. After researching both sides of the debate, for and against school uniforms, I believe that a mandatory uniform policy would serve to reduce violence in our own school district. My hope is that by the end of my speech, most of you will agree with me. I will begin by detailing the problem of school violence, then I will address some of the causes behind the problem, and finally I will conclude with my solution. So with our roadmap in place, let's begin with the problem. Bullying and violence in the school setting is a serious problem nationwide. First of all, I ask you to vanquish the notion that violence and bullying is only a problem in large school districts. That's just not true. In a 2016 report titled "The Indicators for School Crime and Safety," the National Center for Education Statistics, or NCES, reported that students residing in rural areas were actually victimized twice as often when compared to students in more urban areas. So the point to remember is that violence can take many forms, some less obvious than others. While larger school districts may have more gang presence or drug activity, rural schools in particular have the added effect of isolation. There are far less friends to turn to if you become the target for school violence. In addition, students who have been bullied may experience fear and anxiety about going to school. In the Indicators for School Crime and Safety report, the NCES claimed that 5% of students nationwide had avoided going to school or skipped certain classes because they were afraid. So this can seriously impact a student's academic performance. And on that note, I wanted to show you a slide I've prepared with some important numbers about school violence. You might think some of these numbers seem low, but they actually represent a survey of the 15 million American students in grades 9 through 12. So 22% actually equals 3.3 million students across the nation who had been bullied at school. 12% equals 1.8 million students who had been in a physical fight on school property. And 5% is equivalent to the 750,000 students across the country who avoided going to school because they feared for their safety. So these are significant numbers. Now that we understand the scope of the problem, let's talk about some of the reasons why school violence and bullying happen. There are 2 potential causes that I want to talk to you about today. And the first is, simply put, differences. There are all kinds of differences that we can be picked apart for. Could be a physical characteristic, could be a disability. What about a particular style? According to a textbook, Challenging Behavior in Elementary and Middle School, Barbara Kaiser and Judy Rosminski, both educators and consultants, claimed that 20% of students who said they had been bullied said that it was because of their appearance or that they just didn't fit in. Unfortunately, sometimes the very individuality that our students are looking to achieve can also mark them as victims. The second is socioeconomic status. In a 2014 report, Socioeconomic Status and Bullying, a meta-analysis, authors Dieter Wolk and Neil Tippett of the University of Warwick Department of Psychology examined 28 different studies pertaining to socioeconomic status and bullying. They found across the board that having a lower socioeconomic status greatly increased your odds of becoming a victim. And as we all know, The clothing a child wears to school every day can make their socioeconomic status very evident. Now that you know some of the reasons why school violence and bullying happen, let's talk about the solution. The solution, which is to implement a mandatory uniform policy, has two key benefits. First, studies have shown that schools that implement a mandatory uniform policy saw an overall reduction in school violence. Procon.org, it's a nonprofit charitable organization, presents quality research on a host of different topics, details a study done on a middle school in Sparks, Nevada, 1 year after they implemented a mandatory uniform policy. In that school, data showed a 63% decrease in the amount of police log reports. That amounts to reduced gang violence, less student fights on school property, and less destruction of school property. Second, even though school uniforms may limit to some degree self-expression and creativity, they also create a sense of unity among students. According to the Procon.org website, school uniforms level the playing field, and they take the focus away from individual differences and put it back on education where it belongs. So in this respect, they also serve to diminish socioeconomic lines, and a child can no longer be singled out based on his or her clothing. In conclusion, school uniforms are a valuable way to reduce violence and bullying in our schools. Let's review what we've learned today. First, we learned that violence and bullying in schools is a serious problem nationwide, not limited to large school districts, and that the resulting fear and anxiety that students face can have a negative impact on their school performance. Second, we learned some of the reasons behind school violence and bullying, to include individual differences in clothing, as well as the role of socioeconomic status. Finally, we learned that the solution is to implement a mandatory uniform policy, which would create a sense of unity among students and diminish socioeconomic lines, thereby reducing school violence. Whether or not students like school uniforms is up for debate, but it is true that they foster a safer school environment. And if we value our students' safety and well-being above all else, then we must advocate for practical, common-sense policies that will combat school violence and bullying. Uniforms are one way that we can really encourage mutual respect among our students and deflect against violence and bullying. I know you all will agree that our children need and deserve to feel accepted, comfortable, and safe in their school environment. I hope that you will consider supporting a mandatory uniform policy for our school district.